Hey guys, welcome back to our second set of notes here for chapter 24. After kind of chewing over a few ideas with some students in class, they were talking about how long they felt their attention span lasted in a video. And so I'm going to kind of take that information, I'm going to chop this chapter into little sections, little short videos. And you guys please give me your feedback when you see these. If you're like, yeah, it's too short, just cover more content. We certainly can. But let's try a short little video. We're just going to do one section. We're just going to do sponges and one other type of animal called Hydras today, and then we'll shut it off real short, 5 minutes or so, and we'll see what you think of that. So our first invertebrate animal is a sponge. When you think about a sponge, you might think of something like this in the ocean, this big hollow vase-like tube. You might think about the thing you use in the kitchen to clean your dishes might be a sponge. We might think about this guy here, of course, SpongeBob, he's a sponge. And a sponge is an animal. And as far as animals are concerned, it's about as simple as it gets. Sponges have no true tissues. And so like in a human, you have epithelial tissue, makes up like lining of membranes, skin and stuff, and you have connective tissue and all these different types of tissues that make up a human. Muscular tissue, nervous tissue for nerve system, moving around, that kind of stuff. Sponges don't have any of that. They don't have any true organs. None of the cool stuff. Liver, stomach, pancreas, none of it. Very, very simple. But they are an aquatic animal. They count as an animal because they can do all the things you need to do to be an animal. Move, acquire nutrition, reproduce, those sorts of things. And we've got over 5,000 species living in tropical seas. Primarily going to be saltwater animals, but I think there are a few rare exceptions that get that freshwater sponge life as well, but there are not too many of those. Generally, they're going to be asymmetrical, kind of shaped like a vase, like that first picture we had in the last slide, or rather a column if you prefer. And as an adult, they're going to live attached to a surface, growing on a coral reef, growing on the bottom of the sea, something like that. They're not free swimming or free floating or anything like that. They're attached to the surface. And they're what's called suspension feeders. And a suspension feeder is an animal that does not travel to get its food, but it filters food from the ocean. And so they got to pump a lot of water in to be a filter feeder. And they're going to pull things out of that ocean water like algae and protists and little cells and organic debris, and they will digest that, and that's their primary form of nutrition. So they have to pump a huge volume of water to get a very small amount of food, but they also don't really have to move or go anywhere, so they have a pretty stationary life as far as that's concerned. So here, let's say this is your whole sponge, right? We're going back to this kind of image. This whole thing right here is your sponge that we're looking at in the next picture. So this is a sponge body, and it's got pores where it's going to bring water in, it's going to create a water current, and it's going to have a pore where it shoots water out. That's generally the top of the sponge, kind of in current and X current, we get water out. And as that water is traveling through the sponge, that's where we're going to be filtering food. And so when we look at the inside wall of this sponge, we're going to take a little piece of sponge wall and look at the inside of it. Here's what you'd see. Most of the sponge body is an acellular mass. It's this big mass with it's not truly composed of tissues, and it's not truly composed of cells. Not to mean there aren't glass-like structures in them called spicules that are going to give it kind of a tough resistance to, a sponge doesn't just get knocked over by the tide. It does add a little bit of structure, and some amoebocytes or cells that remind us of amoebas. They can kind of travel a little bit within that sponge body. They can transport food to other places. They can transport waste to other places. They're kind of a one-stop shop for what you're going to need to do in the body. But when it comes to capturing food, you're going to need a collar cell. And these collar cells right here have one flagellum, and that flagellum does what flagella do. It just beats. And instead of propelling the cell, it makes a current. And so all these flagella beating together create a current inside a sponge that makes that water flow through. And as the water is flowing through, little cellular debris, algae and stuff, will get stuck right here on this mucus-lined membrane, or that collar. And these guys here are called choanocytes, by the way. You don't have to spell that correctly by any means, but it starts with a CH, choanocytes, and or collar cells. And so the food gets stuck there, The choanocyte transfers it to this acellular mass, and that food can be processed and distributed by the amoeba. So a very simple animal. It's effective. Water can come in through the pores. It can leave through the top of the sponge. They can grow. They can reproduce. But a very, very simple design. And so when it comes to sponge reproduction, essentially all of them are going to be hermaphroditic. Each individual can produce both eggs and sperm, and it will release the sperm into the water. And then the sperm have to swim to the female. And of course, if they make it, there's a chance of sexual reproduction. If they don't, then they go into the category of digestible organic material in the ocean. And so if they make it, they fertilize an egg, and everything goes right, then they're going to make a zygote. Not that different from other animals, or plants for that matter. And that zygote will grow and develop into a ciliated larva. Now that's kind of the weird part. You'd think, a baby sponge looks like an adult sponge. It kind of sticks in the ground, starts to grow. They actually don't. Baby sponges are crazy looking. Ton of cilia. The larva is free swimming, moving through the ocean. Kind of looks like a big protist kind of thing. And so that's the sexual reproduction method. Then when that larva swims off somewhere else and lands, it can start to become an adult sponge after that, and more of a polyp where it's fixed to the bottom of the sea. Now there's another way to reproduce. There's gemmules as well. And you'll see this in some of those freshwater sponges where they have seasonal temperature variations, or it might even become dry in the pond they're living in. And a gemmule is a tiny clump of resting cells that are encased in a hard coat. You might remember the word endospore for bacteria. Gemmules are kind of like that for sponges. They are a clump of cells in the sponge that can survive tough times. Now, they can be dispersed by the wind or by current and land and grow into a new sponge that's kind of like a clone of that parent sponge. And so sponges are successful because they've got sexual reproduction and asexual reproduction. And animals and plants that can do both of those kind of have the deck stacked in their favor, if you will, because if life is good, they can go through asexual reproduction and make clones. And if the environment's tough, they can go through sexual reproduction and get that diversity that you get with sexual reproduction. So sponges have good strategies. All right, so that's enough about sponges. Let's go to cnidarians. Silent C in that word, cnidarians. These are predators. Predators with stinging cells that we call cnidocysts. Sometimes we call them nematocysts, but they're a cell that will sting prey, and some of them will paralyze the prey or slow the prey down, hold the prey on, that kind of stuff, like a little harpoon. So cnidarians have 10,000 species. It's a pretty broad category of stuff. It includes things like corals, like a coral reef, for example. It's not a rock. It's living animals that make up a coral reef. And they can grow just like living animals can grow, and they can die just like living animals can die. They also sea anemones. If you recall the whole Finding Nemo show, what do you live in? And he's trying to say the word anemone. You guys know what a sea anemone is. And then jellies, which we commonly call jellyfish. They're not actually fish, but we call them jellyfish. So the body plans of these guys, they have two ways they can survive. The first is called a medusa. A medusa is bell-shaped, so it kind of looks like this. And it's free-flowing in the water. You think the jellyfish that SpongeBob's catching, kind of this sort of guy. And they're floating around in the water. That's a medusa. And then they also have a polyp. And a polyp is a tubular animal. Think like a coral, where you got the bottom of the sea, and they've got basically a little cone-shaped body that is fixed to the ocean floor, and they live in that cone. They don't swim around. They don't travel. That's a polyp. And so these guys can live in both forms, and sometimes they'll be a polyp when they're a baby and a medusa when they're grown up, and they can change. And so those are two body plans that you can see. Sometimes you'll see both. Sometimes you'll see one. But that's what you should be looking for. Free-flowing medusa. Remember, medusa had the long snake hair. So you think of the jellyfish with the long, crazy arms swimming around. That should help you remember that. So these guys are going to use tentacles to sting and capture prey. Jellyfish can sting. We've seen Nemo, and we've been to the beach. We know jellyfish can sting. And the goal is not to sting people. They want to sting and catch little fish, little prey. And these guys have no brain. But they do have nerve cells that can transmit a signal that's pretty simple, like the tentacle has been touched. nerve cells, move the tentacle, something like that, but not anything nearly as complicated as brains that you might see in reptiles or mammals. And so here's your classes, and I threw a few pictures in here to help you out. The first class, and I don't think you necessarily need to memorize these class names, that can be kind of tough, but they're hydrozoans, and hydra is a freshwater polyp, so the base of the polyp is fixed to like a twig or a rock or something stationary, and then the top part of the polyp, he floats out and just extends these tentacles and just waits. And if a little tiny, protist like a water flea or an amoeba or something he can eat swims in and it hits one of those tentacles, there are also nerves that run down those tentacles. And when something hits it, it tells the tentacle to go ahead and contract. And it'll throw out a bunch of nematocysts or cnidocysts and stab it with all these little filaments. And then it'll pull it in real slow and shove it down into the cavity of the body and just start the slow process of digestion. Here's another hydra, and it's showing how it's doing asexual reproduction, which is super cool, and it's called budding. And so the hydra literally grows this little bud out of the side of him, and it grows a clone hydra, and when it's big enough, it just breaks off of the parent, sinks to the bottom, and grows right next to him. And so that's one way that hydra can reproduce pretty quickly if the environment's good. So there's anthozoans, that's corals and sea anemones. Here's your sea anemones right here with the clownfish swimming through them, kind of that picturesque sea anemone thing. And then corals are like what's on a coral reef, what lives in a coral reef. There are also cubozoans, which are box jellies, and you guys kind of know what a jellyfish looks like, so I didn't throw a picture in there. And then there's scyphozoans, and those make up most of the jellies that are actually washing up on beaches, things that we see, and also the Portuguese man of war jelly is a scyphozoan jelly. So here is a really cool picture of your nematocyst. You get this barbed thread right here inside. We're looking at, one tentacle of this guy right here, and we're zoomed way in, and you get this barbed thread. It's pretty nasty looking, and then there's a little trigger, which is kind of like a cilia, cilium that would like help him swim around, is a trigger for this. So when the old water flea is cruising around and he bumps into this thing, lid opens up, and these barbs are discharged straight out, and they will stick into or onto that simple animal or protist that it's catching, and then that thing can't get away. And so that's how these kind of can, one, help animals that might want to kind of be attacking the hydra to get away, and also to get prey. So let me show you a video of those real quick, because they are kind of fun. First one we're going to show you, this guy right here, is a hydra, and that is a water flea, and that is a water flea, and he's going to catch a third one here. He's just kind of hanging out, being a hydra. Another water flea swims in, boom, got him. And he stabbed him, and he's still alive. He's going to try to get away, and it's kind of gross because it takes him a while to die, and that hydra ends up eating him, kind of sort of still alive. And so now you start, what we're not going to hang out for is the 4.5-minute process where he opens up this real simple cavity because he's a big green hollow tube, and he's going to shove every single one of these huge water fleas into his hydra body, which is just insane, but he does it. So let me show you this other video how he caught it, because that's arguably a little bit cooler. This is an up-close video, and when a YouTube publisher's name is Ninja Squid, you know it's going to be worthwhile. So here we've got, this is a microscope just on the outside epidermis, if you can even call it an epidermis, outside layer cells, that make up a hydra, and it'll show all these nematocysts firing out of it, which is really cool. Boom, there they are, and you can see they're just covering this whole area. It's just thousands of them. So nice and smooth, something bumps into it, and boom, they shoot out and they stab their prey, and if everything works out well, they've got themselves a meal. So hopefully that helps kind of understand how that all works out. But that's how they catch some food, so that's kind of cool. All right, step by step, got it. Oh, thank goodness. I thought I was just being a crazy person. Look at that. Epidermal cell. Wow, how lucky is that? Okay, I'm not as crazy as I thought I was. All right, cnidarians, predators with stinging cells. So some of our marine hydrozoans are going to have this life cycle that include the polyp, the medusa, and some of them will even have a third larval stage in there. And here's what it'll kind of look like. Let's start right here. Sperm and egg, sperm and ovum, sperm and ova, whatever, from a female medusa and a male medusa. Swim through the ocean. Sperm finds the egg, and they make a zygote. The zygote starts to develop into a big cluster of cells, like a lot of animals and plants do when they're fertilized into a zygote. And it grows into a ciliated bilateral larva. How weird is that? This thing, you can cut it in half like this. Not a very clean cut, sorry about that. And get clear left and right images. But when it's an adult, it radiates out in radial symmetry like spokes on a wheel. So they're different in different life stages. And so this larva swims around in the ocean, no eyes, no ears, no brain, just cruising and hoping he's not eaten by something else. And when he finds a good place, don't ask me how he knows, he lands. And when he lands, he's going to turn from a ciliated larva into a polyp. And so now he's fixed to a coral reef or the ocean floor or something. And he's going to change his body entirely. And he's going to start to grow out into this tall polyp. Now the polyp's going to grow rings growing up the polyp. And as they do that, those rings are going to develop into brand new animals. And those new animals, which are going to become fully grown, are going to bud off as medusas. And so here they're showing a colony. He grew multiple branches. And so this one polyp that landed could actually end up making a whole bunch of medusas. And so it could feed like so, or it could branch off and become a free-floating medusa that can go on to release eggs or can go on to release sperm into the ocean. And so it's a crazy life cycle, but there you have it. Some of these can feed, some of them can butt off and swim away to feed, and it's a weird thing, but it works. So there's your steps that I just talked you through. Hopefully it makes sense. And here's some pictures of some pretty cool ones. So here's a hydra. He's hooked to a branch. He's got a water flea. A few minutes later, there's no water flea, but the hydra's gut is huge. I don't think they have true guts, so I'm worried about saying the word gut too. And I bet gastrovascular cavity, we could use that word. Yeah, the hydra's gastrovascular cavity is full of a water flea, and he'll digest them over time. Here's your reef-building coral, which is this guy right here, and it's got all its little polyps are sticking out, filter feeding away. And if you were to brush them, they might be able to kind of suck back in and hide. And then there's a sea anemone, which I already showed you. Here's the box jelly. I don't know why, it makes me kind of nervous. Oh, that's why. Makes a toxin that can kill a person. See, there's reason to be nervous. Okay, who would have thought? And then the Portuguese man-o-war is actually a colony. And the purplish blue air-filled float is a modified polyp. So gross, but also cool. Okay, I told you we'd do one section. That's one section. So we're going to shut it off there and call it a video. We'll pick up flatworms next time. Let me know what you think of the shorter videos. Thanks for your time.